I played with a Ouija board one day with some friends. We asked questions, but instead of the planchette moving to certain letters, it began to move in a strange pattern. It went to all four corners of the board and made an X, then it just went in circles. The next time I used the board, it was with a different friend at his house. Again, the planchette moved in the same strange pattern. I felt like it was some kind of hex. Later that night, when I was sleeping, I felt a forceful hand grab my arm and wake me up. Everyone else in the house was sound asleep. The name Ouija comes from the French word oui and the German word ja, both meaning yes. There are many speculations concerning the origin of the Ouija board, but the one that many people seem to agree on is that a similar game was played by the 14th century gypsies in order to commune with spirits. Because of the nature of the game and the perceived dangers associated with it during the time period, it was at some point altogether prohibited in many parts of Europe. In the mid-1800s, some people that searched for ways to contact the deceased, mostly those that have recently lost loved ones, began looking for the Ouija board as one way to do so. Entrepreneur Charles Kennard found Kennard Novelty Company and began selling talking boards, the first in a line of commercial Ouija boards to come. There's a story of how the founders of the company asked the talking board what to name it, and the board apparently gave the letters O, U, I, J, A, hence the name Ouija came to be. It is also said that when the name was revealed by the board, it added that it meant good luck. The Ouija board began gaining popularity in the United States during the 1920s, to the point a couple using the board was illustrated on the cover of the Saturday Evening Post issue, one of the most influential magazines at the time. It was sold to Parker Brothers, a company known as the early publisher for the game Monopoly in 1966, and then to Hasbro Incorporated, an American worldwide toy and board game company. The Ouija board was, at first, introduced to the general population as an indoor novelty board game. Along with the alphabets, simple words such as yes, no, goodbye, and maybe are engraved on the board. How to play is relatively simple. There is a pointer or planchette, a small, often triangular wooden indicator with a circular opening in the middle that is used to highlight a chosen letter. Two or more players set their hands on the planchette together and begin with the question, "Is anyone here with us?" If the planchette moves to point yes, then the game begins. Simple yes or no questions are asked during the early stage of the game, and then eventually builds up to more complicated questions that require answers to be spelled out. The players ask a question, then reads the response of the board letter by letter as they are indicated. But there are several rules to the game that must be followed under any circumstances. Number 1. Never use the Ouija board alone. 2. Do not play the game for more than 15 minutes at a time. The reason being that the spirit summoned by the board gets stronger as the game continues. 3. Questions about the future is not allowed. Not only will the answers be disturbing, the question will cause unusual activities such as sudden shaking of the board or even other objects nearby. 4. Keep the planchette on the board until the end of the game, as taking it off will cause the spirit to disappear. 5. At the end of the game, players must ask the question, "May we end the game?" and receive the answer, "Yes." Then the planchette may be directed to the word "goodbye" to indicate the end, along with verbal goodbyes from players. 6. The questions must be asked in English. There are various urban legend stories associated with the usage of the Ouija board, most of them concerning the unfortunate fate of the players that broke one or more rules of the game. Many of these stories feature paranormal activities such as objects that move on their own, the Ouija board giving answers to questions that to the player's surprise, only they knew or no one does and finds later to be true. Themes of possession, insanity, and death is also common. One of the most prominent and perhaps the oldest lore of the Ouija board is that of the exorcism of Roland Doe. Roland Doe is the pseudonym of an anonymous boy that underwent a series of exorcisms performed by the priests of the Roman Catholic Church in the 1940s. The 14-year-old boy was the alleged victim of demonic possession, and the events were recorded by the attending priest. Subsequent supernatural claims surrounding the events were used as elements in the 1971 novel The Exorcist, which was then adapted to movies as the famous 1973 film of the same name. Roland and his family lived in Cottage City, Maryland. Roland was an only child and was dependent upon adults in his household for playmates, primarily his aunt Harriet. Harriet, who was a spiritualist, introduced Roland to the Ouija board when he expressed interest in it. After Aunt Harriet's death, the family experienced strange noises, furniture moving on its own, and ordinary objects such as vases flying or levitating when the boy was nearby. This strange turn of events caused the family to have the boy being seen by the local pastor, eventually leading to a series of exorcisms by a Roman Catholic priest. During the exorcism, the boy slipped one of his hands out of the restraints, broke a bed spring from underneath the mattress, and used it as an impromptu weapon, slashing the priest's arm and resulting in the exorcism ritual being halted. The family traveled to St. Louis, where Roland's cousin contacted one of his professors at St. Louis University, who in turn spoke to an associate of College Church. Together, both priests visited Roland in his relative's home, where they observed the shaking bed, flying objects, the boy speaking in a guttural voice and exhibiting an aversion to anything sacred. One of the priests involved in the exorcisms stated that during the event, words such as evil and hell, along with other various marks, appeared on the teenager's body. The boy also broke the priest's nose in the process. They say after the rite was over, the anonymous subject of the exorcism went on to lead an ordinary life. There are several different rituals found around the world that, within the context of summoning a spirit to commune and ask questions, are very similar to that of the Ouija board. I'd like to talk about two such rituals here, because of the similar themes between them and the Ouija board and the subsequent supernatural phenomena that are apparently connected to them. The Kotkuri-san game, originating from Japan, is one such ritual that involves a coin, a piece of paper with written letters, and the drawing of sacrificial food meant for the spirit. Two players, sitting opposite to one another, each place one finger on the coin and chant an incantation to begin. The questions will be answered in a similar manner to the Ouija board, the coin lingering on the markings as an answer or tracing letters already on the paper to form words. The Charlie Charlie challenge is another example of such ritual that began in the modern age. Originally described on the internet in 2008, the game was popularized in the English-speaking regions in 2015, partly through the hashtag Charlie Charlie challenge. The method used in this game is very similar to Ouija, even simpler still, involving 4 pencils in the early version and 2 pencils in the later version. The current version, 2-pencil game, is played by crossing 2 pencils or pens to create a grid with sectors labeled yes and no, and then asking questions to a supernatural entity known as Charlie. The upper pencil is then expected to rotate to indicate the answer to such questions. The first question everyone asks by speaking into the pencils is, "Can we play?" or "Are you here?" or "Are you there?" As with most urban legends of similar theme, these rituals lack evidence and even records to back their supernatural claims. The Ouija board and other similar games that involve players keeping their hands on certain objects for it to seemingly move on its own has been explained by what is called the ideometer phenomenon. To sum it up, ideometer phenomenon is a psychological phenomenon wherein a subject, or in the case of Ouija board games, players, make motions unconsciously whereby a thought or mental image brings about a seemingly reflexive or automatic muscular response. When players keep their hands on the planchette on a Ouija board, they are unconsciously moving the indicator, depending on the mental image initiated by the questions they ask. The Exorcism of Roland Doe, as fascinating as the story is, in truth has many holes that investigators of the story found inconsistent and even far-fetched. Aside from the religious aspect of the story, which I will not discuss in this video or any others as a matter of fact, much of the commonly accepted information about this story is based on hearsay, is not documented, and was never fact-checked. One YouTuber by the name of billschannel did a 3-part episode on Ouija board in order to see if the alleged phenomenons will present themselves. To sum it up, the experiment was a total bust, with no such phenomenon happening despite Bill, the creator of the channel, checking with his subscribers and complying with their requests on how to do it correctly. He even went into a remote cabin in the dark and did everything the viewers asked him to do, and nothing happened. The part where he vocally provokes the spirit in question, Zozo, I personally found hilarious. You can go watch part 1 on this link if you'd like. The real fun part of Bill's videos, I find, are in the comment sections. Part 1 is littered with comments that pleads Bill not to go through with the experiment and that it's a very bad idea. On part 2, however, you can see that the majority of the comments are those of correcting Bill on the processes and methods he has used. The comments on part 3 changes even further, with comments saying that he just didn't do it right, and that's why the spirit did not manifest. It's interesting to see the variety and complexity of the "don't do this" rules in these comments, because it seems to be geared toward influencing the player so that he or she becomes tense and sensitive to even the subtlest changes in the environment, as well as giving reasons as to why the game didn't work, should there be no responses. The videos of the Charlie Charlie challenge, of course, are mostly done with simple puffs or air subtly blown through the mouth to move the pencil, as the angle of the pencil resting on the other one allows for easy manipulation with the lightest force. Games like these should be just that, games, that should be enjoyed in a similar fashion to horror stories and movies. No less, no more. I admit, with all the stories I've heard that involve the Ouija board, the thought of playing the game gives me chills. But then again, that's the reason why we keep coming back to these stories, right? That's all for this video. Thanks for watching, and I hope to see you with another good story. Have a great day.